Morning, dear friends. Today I thought we'd make a soap that is really easy for dads, or for a son, or for a boy. And it's something that is a really simple technique, because you don't actually need microwaves, you don't actually need to have any molds or such. We're going to make a soap on a rope. So I have a bar of soap here. It's plain white. If you wanted to, you could add fragrance to this, but for our purposes today, I'm not going to do that because the soap already has fragrance. Then I'm going to need to have a grater, and I'm going to use the coarse side of the grater. I need to have a piece of soft cord. So I've got this navy blue cord, which is really nice. And then you need about 75 centimeters to be able to pop it over the head to make your soap on a rope. And I'm just going to take the two ends and tie them together like that to make a really nice strong knot. And then I'm going to just snip off all the excess that I don't need, like that, and snip off some of this. So I've just got a really short knotted end, and you want this to be nice and strong. Okay, so that will be inside your soap. Give it a jolly good tug so that it all stays in place like that, and do this before you start working with the soap so that you don't get all messy. Right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my soap and I'm going to grate it on this coarse grater, and you'll see that the soap is pretty hard, so it's easy to do. And I'm going to do this until I have grated the amount of soap that I think I will need for my soap on the rope, which is probably about 2/3 of this bar, but you could make it a really big one. Okay, so I'm just going to continue grating now. So what I would like to do now is to transfer some of the grated soap into the smaller bowl, and I'm just going to use a dessert spoon to do that. I think I'm going to take about 6 spoons of soap, and we'll see how we go. So what's that? 4, 5, 6. I'm going to keep that spoon separate so that it's dry. And into this little mix, because I'm making this for a man, I'm going to add some tea leaves. Now this is just regular household tea, and I find it's really nice when you put them in, because you get that little bit of texture, but also as time goes by and the soap is starting to harden up, you will find that you actually start to get a lovely sort of soft brownish color, and it just makes it a bit more interesting. You could add things like cinnamon, you could add some ground up cloves, which give quite a nice smell, but you don't want anything that's too hard on the skin, so this finely ground tea I think is perfect. So I'm just going to give that a mix together, and then I'm just going to use my little wooden spoon to take about 3 spoonfuls of water. So this is probably about 10 mils in a spoon. It's a little bit larger than a teaspoon, and all I'm trying to do is trying to get the soap that I've grated just to start to stick together. I don't want it wet, and I don't want it very soggy. So you can see it is starting to stick together nicely like that. And now it gets messy. Well, I'll say messy, it doesn't have to be terribly messy, but it's the fun part of putting things together. So you want to take your piece of rope that you've got, and you want to start to mold the soap around it. So you're going to have to start to squeeze it and press it around that so that you're having some point of contact. Okay, make sure that it's actually getting into the fibers of the rope so that it really sticks nicely. And this part, that if you were doing this with children, they might need a little bit of help. I find if you use just the inside of your hand, the palm, and you'd use that just to support it, just to melt it together. But you will see that the little grated flakes of soap are starting to melt and make a new shape. They're not looking like grated soap anymore. Right, so you don't want it any wetter than this. Okay, so you're just going to keep adding and building up your soap. And I like to do this slowly so that I don't end up with a lot of damp soap and I'm not able to use it. I'm just going to keep adding to this. It's a lovely thing to do as a gift, really lovely. And if you have family members who only have a shower, it's a great gift, because if it falls, it's not going to go far further than just down your neck. Okay, so keep molding it. If you get to this stage and you think, oh, that's looking a little bit small, then just simply take your dry spoon and add in a couple more spoonfuls of soap. So I'm going to add another 3 scoops, so that was 9 spoons of soap. And now I'm going to take some of this drier soap and pack it onto the outside. I don't want this to get very wet and squishy because I'm going to have to leave it to dry out in any case. So I'm just taking the dry soap, molding that into what I've already got. And don't worry too much about the shape until the very end. I suppose if you wanted to, you could cover the rest of the rope in a bit of cling wrap before you started, but it will also wipe off quite easily. Right, so you can see that that's starting to form a really nice shape. And I'm going to go just a bit bigger than what I've got. Sorry about the clanking bowls. I used to teach soap making back in South Africa when I was there for, I probably did it for nearly sort of 18 years. And we had such fun when we made these. We used to put all sorts of things in, tea leaves, we used to use cinnamon, but the ground cinnamon. And then we would add in some textures of things. You know, we might grate in a little bit of lemon peel or something like that. Right, so I'm going to put some more dry soap in here, but this time, because the outside of the soap is getting really dry, so that's now 10, 11. Let's see how we do. I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of moisture to this, as in 1 spoon, just to dampen it. And once you've got what you feel is a decent size ball of soap, then you can start to shape it. Right, I don't want it to be too heavy, because obviously if it's around somebody's neck, then it's going to be uncomfortable. So I think what I've got in my bowl will be sufficient. Right, let me move my little spoon out the way. So when you've finished your shape like this, what's really important is that you put it onto a piece of baking paper or in a glass or a plastic container, and you leave it then outside just to dry out, because you don't want your soap to be very wet. The softer the soap will be is depending on how much moisture you've got. So you want it to become a little bit firmer. And now I'm just going to use these little scraps of soap and gently dip my finger into the water to seal up any edges that haven't blended together, and just to be able to shape it a little bit more. I'm going to make mine probably a little bit more like a pear shape than a ball, because a ball is actually quite hard for a young kid to do. So I'll just show you how to do a pear shape. So if you've got it in the palm of your hand and you kind of bring your fingers together, you'll see that that makes a nice sort of pear shape, and then a child would easily be able to make this for a dad or a loved one. Okay, so just using the tiny little bit of water on my fingers, blending all those little pieces of soap together, compacting it by pressing my hand together. Okay, there we go, it's starting to come together really nicely. And as this starts to dry out, you're going to see that the little bit of moisture that we have in here from the tea is going to, over a period of a few days, give you that lovely sort of soft brownish color. Right, so I'm just going to use my fingers downward motion like this now to smooth out any lumps. There we go. And it really is very, very easy to do. It's the sort of thing too that you can do one school holidays and then set these things aside. So it's a nice activity, but an activity with a purpose. Right, now I had a piece of baking paper here. Oh, there it is. So now I'm going to take my shaped soap and I'm going to put this on this piece of baking paper, and I'm going to just leave that to dry out, and then I'll show you what it looks like. I've left my soap for about an hour or so, and you can see that it has started to dry off quite nicely, but I just thought I might like to just try and see if I can put a little bit more of the tea leaves on the outside. So let's just see whether it will stick to the surface. They will obviously wash off. Yeah, I'm getting some that are sticking, so I'm just going to put this on just to make it look a little bit more interesting, and then those that don't stick will just simply brush off. And then I'm going to leave my little soap on the baking paper to dry for a day or two so that the moisture content hardens up. And then once it has dried, then I would suggest that what you do is just wrap it tightly in some cling film, because the cling film will preserve it nicely. Cellophane doesn't work very well. I find it's quite loose around the outside of the soap, and it tends to get sort of soapy marks on the cellophane, whereas when you wrap it tightly with cling film, you don't really see that. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this soapy adventure with me, and if you have enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel and giving me a like so that I can get better views on my channel to be able to create more content. But it's been lovely to have you with me. Thank you for joining. Bye.